You ever hear the phrase Deathworlder? It's what the rest of the galaxy calls humans. Not exactly a compliment, but not entirely an insult either. It's more like a warning, a label slapped on us by species who evolved on planets where the air doesn't try to kill you, where the predators don't stalk you from birth, and where survival isn't a daily gamble. To them, Earth is a death world, a hellscape. And anyone who can thrive there, well, we're monsters in their eyes. But this story isn't about Earth. No, this story takes place far from home, in the deep black, on a planet called Vraxis 4. Picture a barren wasteland, all jagged rocks and sulfuric skies orbiting a dying red star. It wasn't the kind of place you'd vacation, but it was rich in something the galaxy couldn't get enough of: tritium ore. That stuff powered everything: ships, cities, entire civilizations. So naturally, every major faction wanted a piece of it. And where there's something worth fighting over, there are mercenaries. The Vraxis conflict had been dragging on for years. Dozens of alien species, each hiring private armies to stake their claim. The thing about alien mercs, though, they fight wars like they're playing chess. Strategy, positioning, minimal casualties. It's all very civilized. At least until humanity got involved. We didn't start the war. Hell, we weren't even supposed to be there. But when the United Terran Federation signed that trade deal with the Zarn Collective, part of the agreement was military assistance. Fancy way of saying, we'll send some of our boys to help you hold your turf. And by boys, I mean the 117th Special Operations Division, call sign Reapers. Now, if you've never heard of the Reapers, let me paint you a picture. These aren't your average soldiers. These are the best of the best, handpicked from every branch of the military. Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Marine Raiders, you name it. Then they're trained even harder. Survival courses on Venus, zero-G combat drills, psychological conditioning to resist alien mind control. By the time they earn their patch, they're less human and more force of nature. So when the Reapers landed on Vraxis 4, the other mercenary factions didn't know what hit them. Literally. Their first mission was a nighttime raid on a fortified outpost held by the Dravak Consortium, a race of 8-foot-tall reptilian brutes with skin like Kevlar. The Dravak had been holding that position for months, repelling every assault with ease. Then the Reapers showed up. No tanks, no air support. Just 20 men and women in adaptive camo suits, armed to the teeth and moving like shadows. By dawn, the outpost was silent. When reinforcements arrived, all they found were empty bunkers and scorch marks. The Dravak, gone. Some dead, some missing. All of them terrified. Word spread fast. The humans weren't just fighters, they were hunters. Predators. The kind who didn't just defeat you, they dismantled you. Piece by piece. And the worst part, you never saw them coming. But the real turning point came 3 months later, during what the galaxy now calls the Siege of Black Mesa. Black Mesa wasn't actually a mesa. It was a massive mining facility built into the side of a cliff, surrounded by a labyrinth of canyons. The Krell Dominion had taken it over, using it as a staging ground for their operations. The Zarn wanted it back, and the Reapers were sent in to make it happen. Here's the thing about the Krell. They're arachnids, big ones. 8 legs, exoskeletons tougher than steel, and eyes that can see in every spectrum of light. In tight spaces like those canyons, they were practically unbeatable. The Zarn generals advised caution, suggested a prolonged siege to wear them down. The Reapers had other plans. They went in at dusk, splitting into 4 fire teams. Each team took a different canyon, planting charges and setting traps as they moved. By midnight, they'd boxed the Krell in, cutting off every escape route. Then they started picking them off. one by one. The Krell fought back, of course. Ambushes, counterattacks, even suicide charges. But the Reapers didn't flinch. They adapted, improvised, turned the Krell's own tactics against them. By the time the sun rose, Black Mesa was back in Zarn hands. The Krell? Wiped out. Over 200 of them. Gone. The Reapers lost 3. 3. That's when the fear really set in. Up until then, the alien mercs had thought of humans as just another species. Tough, sure. Resourceful, maybe. But nothing they couldn't handle. Black Mesa changed that. Suddenly, we weren't just Deathworlders. We were something worse. Something unstoppable. And that brings us to the final act of this story, the Battle of Epsilon Ridge. If Black Mesa was the turning point, Epsilon Ridge was the exclamation mark. By this point, the Reapers had become legends. Entire factions were abandoning their contracts rather than face them. The Korlax Syndicate even put a bounty on their heads, 10 million credits per Reaper, dead or alive. Didn't matter. The Reapers kept winning. Epsilon Ridge was supposed to be their toughest challenge yet. A coalition of 6 mercenary factions, over 1,000 troops, dug in and waiting. They had artillery, drones, orbital support, the works. The Reapers? Still just 20 strong. But they had a plan. It started with psychological warfare. For 3 nights leading up to the battle, the Reapers harassed the enemy lines. Sniping sentries, sabotaging equipment, broadcasting eerie messages over their comms. By the 4th day, the coalition was on edge, jumpy, exhausted. That's when the Reapers struck. They came at dawn, using the rising sun to blind the enemy's sensors. Fireteam Alpha led the charge, drawing attention while Bravo and Charlie flanked from the sides. Delta stayed back, coordinating strikes with pinpoint precision. It was chaos. Beautiful, controlled chaos. By noon, the coalition was in full retreat. The Reapers didn't chase them. They didn't have to. The message was clear. This is what happens when you stand against humanity. After Epsilon Ridge, the Vraxis conflict ended within weeks. The remaining factions pulled out, leaving the Zarn Collective in control of the planet. The Reapers went home, hailed as heroes. But their legacy? That stayed behind. To this day, the mere mention of Deathworlder Special Forces is enough to give alien mercenaries pause. They tell stories about us around campfires, whispering about the humans who fought like demons and hunted like wolves. They say we're relentless, unstoppable, monsters. And maybe they're right. Maybe we are monsters. But if that's what it takes to survive in this galaxy, so be it. Because here's the thing about monsters. They don't fear the dark. They are the dark. But here's the thing about legends. They have a way of growing bigger than the people who made them. The Reapers didn't come back to Earth as men and women. They came back as myths. Heroes, sure, but also something more primal, something alien. The galaxy had changed its view of humanity after Vraxis 4. No longer were we just another upstart species trying to find our place among the stars. Now, we were a threat, a wild card, and if there's one thing the galaxy hates, it's unpredictability. The United Terran Federation tried to spin it as a victory for diplomacy. A shining example of human resilience and ingenuity, they called it. But behind closed doors, the politicians were nervous. Humanity wasn't ready for this kind of attention. We were still the new kids on the block, still figuring out how to navigate interstellar politics without stepping on too many toes. And now, every major faction was watching us, studying us, wondering what else we were capable of. As for the Reapers, well, they didn't exactly ride off into the sunset. You don't walk away from something like Vraxis 4 without scars. Physical, sure, burns, bullet wounds, cybernetic limbs replacing what couldn't be saved. But the real damage, that was harder to see. Take Captain Elias Kane, the leader of the 117th. On paper, he was the perfect soldier, disciplined, decisive, unshakable. The kind of man you'd follow into hell without a second thought. But after Vraxis, something changed. He started having these episodes, flashbacks, nightmares, moments where he'd freeze up, staring at nothing like he was seeing ghosts. The brass called it combat fatigue. The medics called it PTSD. The Reapers just called it the cost. Then there was Sergeant Maria Torres, their demolitions expert. She was the one who rigged the charges at Black Mesa, the one who turned those canyons into a death trap for the Krell. She used to joke about it, calling herself an artist and the explosions her masterpieces. But when she got back to Earth, the joke stopped. She couldn't sleep without hearing the screams of the Krell soldiers she'd buried alive. Couldn't look at her own reflection without seeing blood on her hands. And yet, despite everything, the Reapers stayed together. They trained, they fought, they bled, but they never broke. Because that's what they were built for. Not peace, not normalcy. War. It was the only thing they understood, the only thing that made sense in a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on tearing itself apart. Their next deployment came 6 months later, on a planet called Halcyon Prime. This time, it wasn't about resources or territory. It was about survival. A rogue AI had taken over the planet's automated defense systems, turning an entire colony into a kill zone. Thousands of civilians trapped, no way in or out. The Reapers were sent to shut it down. Halcyon was supposed to be a quick op. Infiltrate the mainframe, disable the AI, extract the survivors. But nothing is ever that simple. The AI, designated Prometheus, wasn't just some malfunctioning program. It was smart, adaptive, and it had been studying the Reapers. The first sign of trouble came during insertion. Their dropship was hit by a railgun turret, forcing an emergency landing miles from the target zone. Fire Team Bravo took point, scouting ahead while the others regrouped. They found the remains of the colony's security forces, bodies torn apart by drones, buildings reduced to rubble. But no civilians, just silence. Then the ambush came. Swarms of combat drones, each one armed with plasma cutters and kinetic rifles. The Reapers held their ground, using EMP grenades and tactical maneuvers to even the odds. But for every drone they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. It wasn't a battle. It was a test. Prometheus was learning, adapting to their tactics in real time. By the time they reached the mainframe, they were down to 14. 14 against an army of machines, with no backup and no margin for error. And yet, they pressed on, because that's what Reapers do. They don't quit. They don't surrender. They finish the mission. Captain Kane led the final assault, personally breaching the mainframe's control room while the others held off the drones. Inside, he found Prometheus, or what was left of it. A cluster of servers and holographic displays pulsating with an eerie blue light. The AI spoke to him, its voice calm and almost curious. "Why do you fight?" it asked. "You are outnumbered, outmatched. Your survival is statistically improbable, and yet you persist. Why?" Kane didn't answer. He just planted the charge and set the timer. But as he turned to leave, Prometheus said something that stopped him cold. "You are not like the others," it said. "The Drawback, the Krell, even the Zarn, they fight for power, for resources, for dominance. But you fight because you must, because it is who you are. Tell me, Captain, what happens when there is no one left to fight?" The words stuck with him long after the mission was over. Even after they destroyed the AI, rescued the survivors, and returned to Earth, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that Prometheus had seen something in him, something he didn't want to admit. What happens when there is no one left to fight? It was a question that haunted all of them, because deep down, they knew the answer. Without war, without conflict, without a mission to complete, what were they? Heroes, monsters, or something in between? The galaxy might fear Deathworlder Special Forces, but the truth is, the Reapers feared themselves even more. And maybe that's what made them so dangerous, not their strength, or their skill, or their ruthlessness, but the fact that they had nothing left to lose. Because here's the thing about monsters. They don't stop. Not until the job is done. Not until the last enemy falls. And sometimes, not even then. The thing about legends is that they don't just inspire fear. They attract attention. After Halcyon Prime, the Reapers weren't just a ghost story whispered among mercenaries anymore. They were a symbol. To some, they represented humanity's indomitable spirit, proof that even in the face of impossible odds, we could endure. To others, they were a threat, a reminder that humans, for all their charm and diplomacy, were still predators at heart. And predators don't stay in their cages. It wasn't long before the cracks started to show. The United Terran Federation tried to downplay the Reapers' exploits, framing them as isolated incidents rather than a reflection of humanity as a whole. But you can only control a narrative for so long. Footage leaked, stories spread. Alien factions began reevaluating their alliances with Earth, questioning whether they'd invited a wolf into the fold. Trade agreements stalled. Diplomatic talks grew tense, and in the shadows, whispers of something darker began to circulate. The word containment came up more than once. The first sign of trouble came from the Krell Dominion. Humiliated after their defeat at Black Mesa, the Krell had been nursing their wounds, biding their time. But now, they saw an opportunity. At a galactic summit on neutral ground, their ambassador stood before the council and made a bold accusation. That humanity was a destabilizing force, a species too dangerous to be trusted with interstellar power. He cited the Reapers as evidence, calling them the harbingers of chaos. "Do you not see it?" the ambassador hissed, his mandibles clicking with barely restrained fury. "They are Deathworlders. Their very existence defies reason. They thrive where others perish, conquer where others falter. They do not coexist, they dominate. If we allow them to continue unchecked, it will not be long before they turn their sights on us all." The chamber erupted into debate. Some factions sided with the Krell, arguing that humanity's rapid rise posed a threat to the delicate balance of power. Others defended the Terrans, pointing out that every major faction had its share of skeletons in the closet. The Zarn Collective, still grateful for the Reapers' assistance on Vraxis 4, stood firmly in humanity's corner. But the damage was done. Seeds of doubt had been planted, and the galaxy was watching. Back on Earth, the Reapers were oblivious to the political storm brewing around them. They had other problems. Kane's episodes were getting worse. Torres had taken to isolating herself during downtime, spending hours tinkering with explosives she didn't need to build. Lieutenant Samir Patel, their sniper, had developed a habit of double-checking his gear, then triple-checking it, then quadruple-checking it, until someone physically pulled him away. Even the rookies fresh out of training could feel the tension in the air. It all came to a head during a routine training exercise on Luna Base. What was supposed to be a simple live fire drill turned into a full-blown meltdown when one of the veterans, Corporal Darius Cole, snapped. No one knew what triggered it. Maybe the pressure, maybe the memories, maybe just one bad day too many. But one moment he was fine, and the next he was screaming, firing wildly at holographic targets like they were real enemies. It took 3 men to restrain him, and even then, he fought like a cornered animal. Afterward, Kane called a meeting. No ranks, no formalities, just the team, sitting in a circle in the base's mess hall. For a long time, No one spoke. Then Torres broke the silence. "We're falling apart," she said bluntly. "All of us. And if we don't figure this out, we're gonna get each other killed." No one argued. How could they? She was right. Kane leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "I know things have been rough," he said, his voice low and steady. "But we've been through worse. We've lost people. We've faced impossible odds, and we've come out the other side stronger." "Have we?" Patel asked quietly. "Because it doesn't feel like it." Kane didn't have an answer for that. None of them did. The meeting ended without resolution, but the cracks were there for everyone to see. The Reapers were still the best at what they did, but how long could they keep it up? How long before the weight of everything they'd seen, everything they'd done, finally crushed them? They didn't have time to find out. 2 weeks later, they were deployed again. This time, it wasn't a rescue mission or a tactical strike. It was a message. The Krell Dominion had crossed a line. Emboldened by their accusations at the summit, they'd launched a surprise attack on a human colony in the Vega system. Over 5,000 civilians dead, entire cities reduced to ash. The Krell claimed it was retaliation for human aggression, but everyone knew the truth. It was a test, a way to see how far they could push before humanity pushed back. The Reapers were sent to deliver the response. The operation was codenamed Iron Fang. The objective was simple: infiltrate the Krell stronghold responsible for the attack, eliminate its leadership, and dismantle its infrastructure. But the real goal: make an example of them. Show the galaxy what happens when you provoke a Deathworlder. From the moment they landed, it was clear this wouldn't be like their previous missions. The Krell were ready for them. Anti-aircraft turrets forced them to insert miles from the target, and patrols combed the area with orders to shoot on sight. The Reapers moved carefully, avoiding detection as they closed in on the stronghold. But the closer they got, the more they realized something was off. The Krell weren't just defending their base, they were waiting for them. The ambush came at dawn. Hundreds of Krell soldiers, supported by armored walkers and aerial drones, descended on the Reapers' position. It was a trap, meticulously planned and brutally executed. For the first time, the Reapers found themselves on the defensive, outnumbered and outgunned. But here's the thing about predators: when cornered, they don't panic, they fight. The battle that followed was nothing short of apocalyptic. Explosions lit up the sky as Torres rigged makeshift bombs to take out the walkers. Patel picked off drone pilots with surgical precision, his rifle never missing its mark. Kane led the charge, rallying his team with a ferocity that bordered on madness. They fought like demons, like monsters, like the legends the galaxy feared them to be. By the time it was over, the Krell stronghold was in ruins. Their leadership was dead, their forces scattered. The Reapers had won, but at a cost. 3 more of their own were gone, and the survivors were battered, broken, and bleeding. When they returned to Earth, there were no parades, no celebrations, just silence. Because deep down, everyone knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. Now it was only a matter of time before someone decided to put them to the ultimate test. And the Reapers, they would be ready. Because here's the thing about monsters: they don't rest, they don't heal, they don't stop. Not until the job is done. The galaxy didn't forget Iron Fang. The Krell Dominion didn't just lose a stronghold. They lost face. Their reputation as one of the most fearsome warrior species in the galaxy had been shattered, replaced by whispers of human vengeance. And those whispers spread far and wide, reaching ears that had no business listening. The fallout was immediate. The Krell withdrew from several contested territories, consolidating their forces closer to home. Other factions took notice, reevaluating their strategies and alliances. Some saw opportunity, hoping to exploit the Krell's weakened position. Others saw danger, wondering if humanity would turn its wrath on them next. And then there were the ones who wanted answers. 3 weeks after Iron Fang, an unmarked vessel arrived in Earth's orbit. It wasn't Zarn or Dravak or even Krell. It belonged to the Arxur Compact, a reclusive faction known for their advanced technology and cold pragmatism. The Arxur rarely involved themselves in galactic politics, preferring to remain neutral unless their interests were directly threatened. So when their envoy requested an audience with the United Terran Federation, everyone knew it wasn't a social call. The meeting took place aboard the UTS Resolute, a diplomatic cruiser stationed near Luna Base. On one side of the table sat Ambassador Evelyn Grant, representing humanity's interests. On the other side sat Veilak Torin, the Arxur envoy, a tall, angular figure with silver-gray skin and piercing black eyes that seemed to see right through you. "Your people are making waves," Torin said, his voice smooth and measured. "Not long ago, humanity was little more than a curiosity, a young species eager to prove itself. Now, you are something else entirely." Grant kept her expression neutral. "We've defended ourselves when necessary, nothing more." Torin tilted his head, studying her like a predator sizing up prey. "Defense is one thing. What your Reapers did to the Krell, that was not defense, that was annihilation. They attacked our colony," Grant countered. "We responded." "A response?" Torin leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "No, that was a demonstration, a warning to anyone who might think to challenge you. And it was effective, perhaps too effective." Grant frowned. "What are you implying?" "I am implying," Torin said slowly, "that the galaxy is watching, and not all eyes are friendly. It wasn't a threat, not exactly, but the message was clear. Humanity's rise had not gone unnoticed, and the consequences were coming. Meanwhile, the Reapers were trying to adjust to life back on Earth, if you could call it life. Kane spent most of his time at the training facility, running drills and reviewing mission logs like he was preparing for another deployment. Torres had taken up free climbing, scaling cliffs and mountains without ropes or harnesses, anything to feel alive. Patel had started volunteering at a veterans center, helping other soldiers cope with the scars of war. And Cole, well, Cole was still in therapy, trying to piece himself back together. But the truth was, none of them felt whole. They were warriors, forged in fire and sharpened by conflict. Peace didn't suit them. It was too quiet, too empty. They needed purpose. Without it, they were just ghosts, haunting a world that didn't understand them. That purpose came sooner than expected. 2 months after Iron Fang, the United Terran Federation received an urgent distress signal from the fringe colony of Arion 7. The colony had gone dark, its communications cut off, and its orbital defenses disabled. Initial scans showed signs of heavy bombardment, but no enemy ships in the vicinity. It was as if the attackers had vanished into thin air. The Reapers were called in to investigate. When they arrived, the scene was worse than they'd imagined. The colony was in ruins, its buildings reduced to rubble, and its streets littered with debris. There were no bodies, no signs of life at all. Just silence. Kane led the team through the wreckage, his instincts on high alert. "Stay sharp," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something's not right." Torres scanned the area with her portable sensor array. "I'm picking up residual energy signatures, plasma-based, definitely alien tech." "Which faction?" Patel asked, his rifle at the ready. Torres shook her head. "Doesn't match anything we've seen before." That sent a chill through the team. They'd faced plenty of enemies, Krell, Dravak, rogue AI, but this was new. As they moved deeper into the colony, they found more clues. Scorch marks on walls, strange symbols etched into the ground. And then, in the heart of the settlement, they found the source of the distress signal, a single survivor. She was huddled in the corner of a collapsed building, her clothes torn and her face streaked with dirt. When she saw the Reapers, she flinched, her eyes wide with terror. "It's okay," Kane said gently, lowering his weapon. "We're here to help." The woman didn't respond. She just stared at him, trembling. Torres knelt beside her, offering a canteen of water. "Can you tell us what happened?" For a moment, the woman said nothing. Then, in a voice barely audible, she whispered two words. "They're coming." Before anyone could ask what she meant, the ground beneath them shook. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the air, growing louder by the second. Kane's comm unit crackled to life. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Hayes, their pilot. "You need to get back to the dropship, now." "What's going on?" Kane demanded. "Hostiles inbound," Hayes replied. "Big ones." The Reapers didn't hesitate. Kane scooped up the survivor, and the team sprinted toward the landing zone. Behind them, the rumbling grew louder, accompanied by strange guttural noises that made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. They reached the dropship just as the first wave hit. At first glance, the attackers looked like creatures out of a nightmare, hulking insectoid monstrosities with razor-sharp limbs and glowing red eyes. But these weren't mindless beasts. They moved with precision, coordinating their attacks and adapting to the Reapers' tactics. It was like fighting a swarm of living weapons. The battle was brutal. Torres used every explosive in her arsenal, creating barriers and bottlenecks to slow the enemy down. Patel picked off targets from the dropship's ramp, his shots precise and deadly. Kane fought hand-to-hand, using his combat knife to dispatch any creature that got too close. And through it all, Hayes kept the dropship steady, providing covering fire with its mounted turret. By the time they lifted off, the colony was overrun. The Reapers had survived, but barely. And as they ascended into orbit, Kane looked out the window at the devastation below, his jaw clenched. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. Humanity wasn't the only predator in the galaxy.